Thank you, Paul. It's a pleasure to be here at Bathurst at the PWI. Just like to first of all congratulate the PWI for actually moving to a regional centre. I think it's a really big move and really well done. Also for the PWI for actually promoting engineering and maintenance within the New South Wales area. You do a great job and you should be proud of your efforts. I'm just going to talk a little bit about Inland Rail, where we're up to and what's happening. And I'll get that right. Just a bit of PR first of all. Obviously Inland Rail goes through 3 states and for New South Wales at peak construction there's about 2,500 jobs which will be involved in New South Wales. Also adds $2.6 billion to the state's economy. So it's not small by any means. It's actually quite a reasonable sized project. The other thing which we need to talk about too is actually why we're building Inland Rail. We're building it to a service offering. Our customers and their end customers want freight in Brisbane at certain times. So the service offering for Inland Rail is a 24-hour transit time for the express service, plus a range of other transit times for other services. It's double stacked, 1,800-metre trains, and we actually also are future-proofing for 3,600-metre trains. I always thought that was pie in the sky type of stuff, but if you ever go to North America, you'll see trains there between 9,000 and 12,000 foot, double stacked, operating very efficiently and successfully. And the other key thing too is about reliability. So we're aiming for 98% reliability. That's really important for that freight to be in Brisbane or in Melbourne or in Perth or in Sydney on time. That's really, really important. So what's been achieved to date? Just before I go into the stats there, it was only just over 2 years ago that the federal government announced a couple of things. It announced that ARTC wouldn't be sold, and at the same time said that you'll also deliver Inland Rail. So it was quite a bit of a surprise in some respect, a very good surprise, but it's only just over 2 years ago since that was announced. And since then, there's actually, as the figures there show, about 320 contracts in place for over $700 million. So in that 2-year period, there's been a fair bit happening. We also are into construction mode now, and I'll talk about construction going forward. This contract for the Parkes to Narromine, which we call P2N, there's always acronyms in railways, aren't there? So from Parkes to Narromine was a secondary main line, wasn't up to the main line standard. We actually are reconstructing that whole line. We were looking at options to actually do partial reconditionings, skim it and the rest of it, but with the issue of, although you wouldn't think about flooding is a big problem, but we're putting that track to 1% immunity. It's upgrading the whole track. It's a brand new, almost concrete sleeve with 60 kg rail, ballast and new formation drainage works. That contract was only awarded October 2018, so about a year ago. And the contractor there is Inlink, a joint venture between BMD and Fulton Hogan. They're on schedule, they're doing a very good job, and in fact we've just actually commissioned the North West Link. That diagram there is actually looking back towards the Broken Hill line. So on the left of the screen is Parkes, to the right is that towards Broken Hill. That's a new connection which connects the main west basically to our new Inland Rail. The other keen thing about Inland Rail too is just not about Melbourne-Brisbane traffic, it's about intercapital freight between Australia. So it's actually freight from Perth to Brisbane and vice versa, from Adelaide to Brisbane and from Melbourne to Brisbane and vice versa. And it's about intercapital freight across that. It also does provide regional connectivity, as Jim was saying, and also better access to the ports. The other issue there too is the Parkes to Narromine. A lot of that rail has been repurposed and has gone down to the CRN line from Junee to Griffith. And the rail from Narrabri to North Star, which is the next project off the list, will be going to the CRN as well. So that's quite important. That's another couple of pictures out at Parkes. Again, that's a connection there. You'll see on the right-hand side there is as Minister Toole explained this morning, that's a $35 million Parkes Pacific National logistics terminal. That's in operation now, and actually trains are running in there. Although we had a little mishap yesterday morning, but that's another issue. But trains are actually running in there now, and that gives the facility gives the ability for Pacific National to run double stack to Perth, which they are doing. It's also the very first complementary investment in New South Wales and for Inland Rail, and obviously working with the state and the private operating companies, they've actually put that together, which is a really good thing. Interesting too, SCT, so ATC have got two major freight customers, SCT and Pacific National. SCT have been in Parkes for over 10 years. So just around the corner there, just off the main line, they've been running double-stack trains to Perth for a long, long time. Just a quick story about SCT. SCT have been running east-west for a number of years. They originally were a trucking company, but went to rail and saw the advantages of it. About 4 years ago, they decided to go to the Brisbane market from Melbourne, a very tough market to get into. They originally used Horizon as a hook and pull contractor. They actually decided to build their own terminal and go into the market themselves. Horizon gave them 12 months to actually get their own act together. They actually built a terminal, got all their locomotives in place within 12 months. A significant amount of achievement to do that. And that's the type of people who are pushing freight in Australia. The other thing too, the express train is actually a 21-tonne axle load, 115 kilometres per hour at about 2.7 horsepower per tonne. So they're quite efficient trains. And when you see the trains going across the Nullarbor at 115 k's an hour double stacked at about 6.5 metres high, they are actually quite considerable beasts, but highly efficient. Again, just in terms of social performance, it's not all about the engineering and the outcomes, but as part of the contract there with Inlink, there's about 373 local residents have been employed in that project. Of that, 88 are Indigenous. There's been 79 local businesses have supplied to the project, and of those businesses, 9 are Indigenous. And there's been about $41.2 million spent with local businesses over that period. So again, these are these spin-off benefits of Inland Rail and the federal government's requirement for us to actually try and invest in local communities as much as possible. So we think they're really good results. The other key thing which Inland Rail is doing, and we talked about trying to get staff in the right locations with the right skill sets. Inland Rail has agreement in place. I think Danny Broad was here today with the AROA for Inland Rail Skills Academy. So that's in its early days yet, but that's again very vital for our project. So we thank ARA for that support with that as well. Quickly in terms of regional connectivity as well, we do have passenger interfaces, and although we have the current track in Victoria, we actually run our V-line, our New South Wales Trainlink services through the northeast of Victoria now, and we do that with freight as we go forward. That will continue to happen. We also have in the Queensland area, we have a requirement to run passenger services through the Queensland area. Not a lot of services, but again, future-proofing is required for that as well. The track is actually available for any people who want to really use it. The track in New South Wales, even at peak capacity, is only going to be 18, 19 trains a day, albeit double-stacked freight containers. So as a commercial provider, anybody wants to come and use our track, we'll actually provide an access charge for it. So we're not excluding passenger services, but it's there. Also, in terms of regional connectivity, Inland Rail has got a fairly tight business case, but we do provide not all tracks will be connected to the level of some people would like, but there are opportunities to do that as well as the business comes online. That is available to do as well. I'll just go on. In terms of what's coming up, I think a lot of people here would have been at the recent industry briefings by Brad Jackson. He went around Brisbane, Sydney, Melbourne, talking about what's coming up. There's about 18 bundles of work which are coming out to the market over the next 18 months. I think our Narrabri and North Star EIA closed last night, so that's our next project. Those packages are of various type of contract types. They're various size of dollars. We acknowledge that the Australian construction industry at the moment has actually got a lot of work on, so we're trying to actually tailor those packages to meet the market as best we can. So there's a fair bit coming up there, and there's a range of D&Cs predominantly, but there's some other contract modes there as well. This is not in New South Wales, but we do have a large technology challenge crossing the Toowoomba Range. It's not too dissimilar to the Blue Mountains, not as high as the Blue Mountains. One of the issues in Queensland is that the corridor we've been allowed to operate in was really designed for a high-speed passenger train. So we're in a fairly difficult area. It's also an area for those people who remember the Lockyer Valley floods, so it's a very sensitive hydrological area. This is our current reference design to get a tunnel through the Toowoomba Range. So on the left-hand side is up towards Toowoomba, and the right-hand side is going towards the coast. We also have to obviously design for diesel-electric locomotives, and we also have to make some assumptions that the current fleet won't change over from day one. So they won't be new age technology locomotives. We've got a whole range of 80 class locos. We need to cater for all that type of things at various specifications. We would love to have brand new locomotives with emissions or maybe even powered by other sources, but that's not the reality. So we need to deal with that with our customers. Double stacking is a major issue as well. Obviously you can see the size of a double stack train there in the tunnel. And actually the ventilation, fumes, toxicity and heat are really the biggest challenge we've got there. Luckily, most of the trains going down the hill will be the laden trains. The backloading won't be 100%. However, our customers are hoping to get as much backloading as possible as they come up the hill. There's some very large challenges there. The tunnel there is about 6.4 kilometres long. It says they're the second longest freight tunnel in the Southern Hemisphere. Well, the one in New Zealand in the Southern Island is the biggest. However, on a recent trip to America, we saw tunnels there of actually up to 12 to 15 kilometres long, double-stacked, single-line trains carrying coal, intermodals and grain. That's a picture of a couple of things there. It's a bit of a busy slide. If I just go back to the previous slide, you can see there's actually a central ventilation shaft with doors, and there's doors at both ends of the tunnel. These are the type of doors which they're frangible, but they actually, that's a tunnel in Canadian Pacific in the Rocky Mountains. That tunnel is about 12 kilometres long, takes double stack trains, and those doors close under certain operating modes. The centre bit there with the little parachutes there is the central shaft, which is about between 200 and 300 metres. We're not quite sure where it is at the moment, but it's between that line. It's a big central shaft. The need for the central shaft, we're still working through. It depends on what your viewer capacity is in 2039 and longer, and how much capacity you do design for it. We have a certain requirement from the federal government to design for a certain capacity. That's about 57 trains a day at peak in 2039. But the view there is, again, a view on coal traffic. Do we think coal traffic will be of that volumes in that period, in that long? And if they were around, would they be running better consists? So we're working through those issues there. But if we do require a central shaft, that's about 200 metres through the Toowoomba Range to the tunnel bore. So a large bit of engineering required. And the diagram there on the right, you won't be able to see that very well, but that's just the ventilation designs. Quite complex. I think the ambient temperature of the area will be between 22 and 23 degrees. So it's quite warm. when you've got locos with 4,000 and 5,000 tonnes up a 1 in 64 gradient. It does produce a lot of heat, toxicity, fumes, all those things. So we've got some big challenges there. That project will be done by a PPP, but to be able to specify what we want that tunnel to operate is what we're working through now, so quite a thing. I think Melissa mentioned about system engineering. We've actually learnt some lessons there that we all thought we were doing system engineering, but we really weren't. So we've got to go back there and actually do it properly and make sure we do validate everything we do, we can prove what we've done and make sure that actually we are getting the results we need. Yep, so there's a fair bit going on with Inland Rail. I just want to reinforce that basically Inland Rail is in construction. I think the success of the Parks connection is great, and I think the work with New South Wales is working well. We still, surprisingly, one of the issues which is strange, the Commonwealth has not got the constitutional right to build railways. So for each of the states have to confer that right to the Commonwealth to build a railway in their state. So in Victoria and New South Wales, we got those agreements done quite quickly and quite efficiently. We're very close to having that signed and done in Queensland now, but that has taken about 12 to 14 months to do, and it's quite a difficult task. I think Jim mentioned utopia. Sometimes I go home and say to my wife, I've got a wry smile on my face, and she says, "What's wrong?" I said, "Well, I had one of those utopia meetings today." So look, that's it about Inland Rail. So as I said, really thank the opportunity, thank the PWI for the opportunity to talk. Inland Rail really supports New South Wales PWI, and hope we can come along and give you updates as we go along. So thanks very much.